going to record this. So we're just starting the recording, and for those of you who are clients, if you found that it was great and you wanted somebody else in your family to see it, then it'll be posted in the next day or so on the client part of our website, okay? Also, a couple of other kind of housekeeping notes. These, what we are calling Thursday series programs, we skipped July, except of course today is July, but we had them in May and June. We started doing them, and then we kind of skipped July. We have another one set to talk about study skills, and then we have somebody talking about writing and editing, I think, scheduled for September. These are open to anyone. You do not have to be a client in my practice. As a matter of fact, these are just a way to share great information that's relevant to high school students, and really also to highlight, you know, people who are out in the community helping high school students. So if you have anyone who you think would be a great speaker, or you have a topic you would like us to discuss and you'd like us to find a speaker, the only thing that we think is really important to this is that whatever the topic is, it's relevant to high schoolers and or their parents. So please feel free to share any ideas or speakers you have with me. And then I'm just going to take a minute and put a commercial in here since we are doing these, and I think they're really great. There's a lot of value to them, but I do want to just say I'm with Schollegiate College Advisors. There are a couple people that I'm not sure whether you're in my practice or not at this moment because I only see your first name. I have been doing college advising through Schollegiate College Advisors, my own business, for over 12 years. Last year I worked with 53 students. My 53 students earned $11.3 million in scholarship money. You don't want to miss the opportunity for great scholarship opportunities and to find great schools by starting too late. I can tell you that's the number one most important thing, is to start early. It's never too early to start, in all honesty. We do teach, we have a class. It's 7 steps to doubling or tripling your financial aid and scholarship money, and it's on Tuesday at noon, and it's a webinar, and if you're interested in it, you kind of register for it just like you registered for this one, but go to our website, look for that webinar at noon on Tuesday, 7 steps to doubling or tripling your scholarship. And thanks for attending. We'll come back to that at the end. One other thing I wanted to mention, and what was it? Something about that. Oh, I know. In parentheses, I have please share the Thursday series with your friends. It's probably going to move to Tuesdays. So just an FYI, just to kind of keep notice of that. And that's partly just a scheduling issue for me, so that I don't have things every night of the week. All right, so I am going to pass this over to Mark, and he's going to have 45 to 55 minutes. Again, if you are on and would just mute yourself, and then if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself or write it in the chat box, and I'll try to keep track of the chat box, and then we'll try to address your question, or you can wait until the end and we'll give you question and answer opportunities. Now I'm going to mute myself, and you have it, Mark.
Hello everyone. Yeah, Lynette, I don't see the chat box, so if there's questions that come in, if you could speak them to me, that would be great. Hello and welcome. This is Seniors and Family Photography. Let's see, so work here. Oh, not that one, this one. Isn't that a kick?
Okay, now Mark, just so you know, all I see is a black screen right now with your name in a box. So I gave the screen back to you, but you might have to click yes, you want it.
Okay. Show my screen. There we go.
Yeah. It's hard to talk about photography if we can't see it, right?
How's that?
Great. Perfect. Okay.
Okay, good. Now we're going. So an overview for today is we're going to talk about high school senior photography, a little bit about family photography, and the ABCs of choosing a new camera. I'm not sure where people's interest is necessarily, so as I go along, if you have interest in any specific thing, let me know. As an introduction, again, my name is Mark Kelly. I'm a full-time wedding and portrait photographer, and I live in Clarkston, Michigan. My daughter is a senior this year. She's in the marching band at Clarkston, and I've got 30-some-odd years, and I started in commercial photography, and in '04, '06 switched over to portraits because of what happened in the commercial world. So I take pictures all day, every week, all the time, and I love it. High school seniors, what I tried to do is kind of think and ask my current clients what kind of questions they had. So this is kind of an answer to all those things. So the first question, we can get right started on it, is what time of year do you need to secure a photographer? As with any professional, the sooner you know that you need someone, the sooner you secure them, the more choices you'll have. The shoots, actually I just came back from a shoot this evening, typically go July to October. Some shoots will start in June. I've photographed some seniors as late as November or December. But most schools in the area, the yearbook shots are due mid-October, and near as I can tell, all the public schools, you can get your shots done anywhere. So as I said, you know, the sooner you secure someone, you'll get better choice. The odds of a photographer not having time for a senior shoot is relatively low, so I'd be surprised if you called a photographer and they said, no, we don't have any more openings. That might happen, but I think it's likely, unlikely that would happen. And do all photographers offer senior portraits? I don't think so. I think a majority of them do. It's very much like family and portrait photography, so it's relatively simple to do. Do you have to do a senior shoot? I don't think that you do. I don't think there's any, you know, if you want to get your student in the yearbook, obviously you have to get a shot taken. And then there's, I'm not a lawyer, I didn't read law, but I read some people talking about the law, and it's uncertain whether a public school can require you to go to any one specific photographer. And near as I can tell, at all the public schools, they have people they recommend, photographers they recommend, and then you can use them or go find your own photographer. I know that at some private schools, they must use a approved photographer for the yearbook shot, and I'm doing a family like that later next week, I think. So I won't do the yearbook shot for them. And this is a little bit of a side note. There are some prominent studios that will do senior reps, and that is basically they talk to students pretty early in the year, maybe as soon as January, and they're not paid, but they're preferred spokespeople for the studios. So if you get approached by a studio for that, look at their offer carefully, figure out what you're going to get exactly. I would think it would be a benefit most times for your student. So let's see, how do you know if your student will get along with photographers? Now we're kind of getting, these are the first couple. Yep.
I just want to ask a question there. So what kind of benefit might someone get if they were a preferred rep for a studio?
They would probably have I don't know anybody that does them, and I don't do them, and it's not because I don't want to, I just haven't gotten to it yet, but I've read about them. They might get more time in front of the camera, some preferred photography sessions where they're experimenting, so they'll get more pictures. They might get reduced costs on some print packages. As near as I can tell, a studio with a rep would be a fairly expensive, well-known studio.
Okay. And it would obviously, somebody might, if they had that opportunity, they would obviously probably be somebody who was earlier in the process, not later.
Certainly, yeah. They're all long ago chosen. They're probably working on what would be 2016 seniors shortly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. So these next couple questions were questions that were on probably one of the emails you would have gotten. How do you know if your student's going to get along with the photographer you choose, and is it important? I can't imagine a photographer wouldn't at least want to have a conversation with you to say, well, here's what I do, here's how I do it, here's some of the things we have to offer, I work this way, and so you could, as with any think it's professional and get a feeling if you can get along with them. But as important as the parents getting along, the student should certainly feel comfortable with the photographer, because that will show if the photographer has a personality as one way and the student is the other. The student may not look natural. I can't think of any photographers that probably wouldn't do a very good job with most students, but you never know. It's always good to see. And then would it make a difference in the final product? You might see that they look a little nervous, or they're not themselves, or that natural. How long does a photography session take? If well, there's one thing I'll take a step back, is how important photography is to you and your student. If it's just a box to click and you just want to get the senior shot done and maybe a handful of shots, you might not invest much time or money into it. If getting a very nice package and spending a lot of time and energy is important to you, obviously you'll search out for your preferred photographers with better packages. So I've seen photographers do sessions as little as 30 minutes and then up to 4 hours. I can't imagine many going much longer than that. I know that the session I did this evening was half of a session. We did 1.5 hours this evening, and we'll probably do 1.5 hours next week, so 3 hours. I think 3 hours is about average. And then will the photographer go only studio location, or will they split the sessions? And do you charge extra for a yearbook photo? I don't know of anybody that does. I can't imagine that they would, but it should be in your documentation whether that's included or not, and that's one of the questions to ask. So how do you choose a photographer? Meet with them, at least have a phone conversation. You might get a referral from them, or the student might say, oh, this, Joe the photographer was fun, was exciting, he had great ideas. You could look at other families or friends' photos and ask them about the experience. I think the experience is not as important as the final product. The final product is pretty important, but does the student have fun with the session? Do they feel good about it? Does the photographer do retouching? Do they do it well? And I'll show examples of what that is a little later. And then how much shooting and booking flexibility do you have? Shooting outside, obviously weather can be an issue. If it pours and rains on your session date, is that the only time available, or are there many other dates? So those are all things to consider when talking with your photographer. So style, we all have different styles. We all approach things differently. The main things that affect style for me anyway are what kind of situations you put the student in, kind of help them with posing, get them into natural situations. A big one for me anyway is light, light, light. How does the photographer use light? Is it all natural light? Do they bring additional lights? The baseball photo down there in the lower right-hand corner, I think I had 2 or 3 additional lights on a cloudy day, so we had something a little special. The portrait of the profile of the young man, I may have had 1 light, maybe just a reflection reflector. So what kind of expression or emotion is the photographer able to get from your student? Is that their natural expression? Are you getting something special? And then what kind of locations? I prefer simple, very simple backgrounds and make the images more about the students than the background. I also prefer that for wardrobe, to keep the wardrobe simpler and make the picture about the student and less about other things. Let's see, so some other considerations. Can you see yourself spending a good part of a day with that photographer? Are they professional, well-mannered, or are they just plain obnoxious? And if they take the best pictures in the world and they're obnoxious, that's something you can make that choice. Where do you go for the pictures? Do they have a studio? Can they recommend a handful of locations? Is that an issue for you? In the middle of the field may be fine. Shooting in a studio might be nice. Natural light photographer. This one
Mark,
kind of scares me. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because,
Sure.
I should tell everyone, Mark did my daughter's pictures, and they were gorgeous, and he was unbelievably good. And honestly, I knew nothing about how to pick a photographer, and I got a recommendation from Susan, and he was unbelievably good. And I'm one of these people, you know what, I just need the picture, but my daughter's one of these people that it was all about the process. And So Mark worked really closely with Emily, my daughter, and took pictures at many different sites. And Mark, can you tell me, like, how would that be priced normally? I mean, because I know with my daughter, I think you did at least 4 sites outside, another day where you met her at the track, and then another day in your studio to get her yearbook picture. So
Right.
tell
We
people,
had
because
two.
I was terribly impressed by the whole thing.
Well, we had 2 outdoor locations, a month apart, weeks apart, I don't recall, and a studio day that was kind of play for me, and I was experimenting, and then the yearbook shot, so it's almost 4 sessions. I can't speak to how other photographers would handle it. They may be more, I don't want to say rigid, I can't think of a better word, but more exacting in their time allotment. Some I know list you, when you talk to photographers, they may limit you to the amount of wardrobe changes you can have, or location changes. My thinking is about 3 hours. If we go over, that's fine. You can change clothes as many times as you can change them. We can go to as many locations as you can in about 3 hours. Emily was fantastic to work with. I was having fun photographing her, so it went over. So that's my take on it. Did that answer it, Lynette?
It did, but could you also kind of tell people, like, what you can either tell them what you would charge, or you can tell them what you what you expect photographers would charge?
Sure, and actually we'll get to that.
Oh, okay, as long as you will, because I think that that's something that I just don't know, and other people didn't know, or I didn't know and other people don't know. Okay, great, thanks.
And I'll get to what I think pricing is. Yeah.
Okay.
I was on natural light. I was on natural light photographer, and that is a warning. Or when I hear that, I think something different. If someone says they're a natural light photographer, it means to me that they don't know how to use strobe lights or other lights. So if you think take a look at that person's whole portfolio, if they say they're a natural light photographer. So another thing to ask is, do they do the yearbook shot? Is it included? Typically it is. And then, are they likely to work with your ideas? I feel that I am, and I hope other photographers are, but if you talk to them and if they've got one way of doing things and it's their way, you may appreciate that, you may not. Is a consultation included? And I have a dog, obviously, 2 dogs. A consultation could be as simple as a 5 or 10 minute conversation. It might be a half-hour drawn out plan for some. Mostly it's about location, style, and wardrobe. You should always talk about hair and makeup, at least talk about what the expectations are. And then the next one here, who's your photographer? If you go to some larger studios, you would certainly want to know, you would want to talk to and meet, maybe not meet, but know who your photographer is. I'm my own business, so I take all my photos, but just be wary that some people might sell you one and give you another. How are proofs presented? It used to be, we all remember, we would get a little proof book and it would say proof across the top, or proof prints. I deliver most of my images on a website, and I've got a new trick up my sleeve that I'll share with some people later that's pretty fun. Some photographers do a proof book where they include all of the pictures are small and lower quality, and then I've even had people, one family request a print of every image I did, so I made prints for them. It was an additional cost. But I think most customers are pretty okay with websites and galleries electronically. So do they offer packages or a la carte printing? I think most photographers will offer you a package. Is it a silver, gold, or platinum? I don't know what they call it, and you get 8x10s and 5x7s and wallets. I don't. All my printing is a la carte. I won't pretend to know what a family does not want. I can come up with what a typical package is. It's typically 8 sets of wallets, a couple 5x7s for grandma, an 8x10, and then maybe 11x14. So that's pretty common. And then here, what are the poses, wardrobe, and time limits? I know that looking at some photographers' packages, they will say up to 3 or 4 locations or wardrobe changes or something. And if that's that's just all the questions you should be asking to make sure you're getting the photographer that's best for you. So here, when can you schedule sessions? Can they be split? I think some photographers would expect to get it all done in a 1 or 2 or 3 hour window and not split a session. Ask if you can do that. One thing that is nice for women or young ladies is their hair. They might want to have curly hair one day and straight hair another. So I find it nice to be able to split a package. So you shoot, this evening you would shoot curly hair, and then in a couple of days you go back and let them straighten their hair and do it differently. So it's you can ask about that. Reproduction rights. I'm not sure how aware everybody is with copyright law, but the way copyright law is, as soon as the photographer clicks the shutter, he owns the copyright to that image. He also can't reproduce for profit. That he can't reproduce the image of your student without written permission. So when you buy a print, really all you have the right to do without written permission is to display that print. You can't make copies of it. A lot of the big box stores are very careful about making copies of things that look professional, and we're thankful for that. The right for you to show images on social media is something that you would want to see and understand and get in writing with your agreement or their guidelines or whatever. I think most photographers would happily grant you the right to include their images on your Facebook page or all the other websites. But that's something to ask about. Are you able to do that? And then what will my total cost be? I think I get into pricing here a little bit. The way I do my pricing is I have a session fee. I charge $300, and then I have an a la carte printing, and most of my packages end up being $500, $600, $800 by the time families get prints. I think a lot of photographers might offer a sitting package with prints included, but think about and ask questions about, so you go in for the sitting or the photo session, and then think about all the prints you would want to order, and then ask how much is that total cost so you're not surprised in the end. And then what do you get? That's kind of with your print order, but be careful and ask how the prints are delivered, and also when you get the prints. Payments is payments. Do you have to pay ahead of time? Do you pay half now, half later? Pay when you receive prints. I ask that the families pay for the session at the time of the session, and then for prints at the time that they receive them. If I mail them to them, I ask them to send a check ahead of time. And I think that's fairly typical. How to choose a photographer? Do you think they're flexible, or are they exacting, or I want to say rigid again, but I can't think of a better word. And again, what happens if you book an outdoor session and it rains? Do you lose that session? Is there an additional charge? I don't know of anybody that charges for that. The next one here, how do they handle blemishes? We're photographing young adults, and certainly acne is a challenge. Take a look at, and you'll see an example here of a before and after for retouching. If your child has actually 1 or 2 pimples or acne, small blemishes, are very simple to retouch. Any photographer with the most basic tools can do that. When the acne gets a little more severe, it's a little more challenging. And what is very challenging is blotchy skin. So if your student has blotchy skin, talk to the photographer. How would they handle it? Look for examples of how they've done it in the past. Our props are pets. The young man here brought his car. I photographing with cars. Can they bring a pet? Can they bring a car? Do they have a horse? Do they have a lightsaber? I got to believe that most photographers would be glad to include that. And then I even had requests to photographs with family members. I'm glad to add family members. It would only increase my opportunity for more print sales, so I always encourage it or allow it or accept the requests from families. How do you search for a photographer? As I said earlier, you could go with a recommendation, but I've done a fair amount of searching, so high school, senior photography, Google will often find you people that are close to your area. You could include your city. There are the American Photographer Association. I'm not a member of them. I think they're a pretty good association. I am a member of PPA, Professional Photographers of America. You could go on their website and look for photographers in your area and know, at least expect that they're going to have a certain level of professionalism. This last one here, High School Senior Photography Association on Facebook, never heard of it. I just happened to see it today, so I threw it up there. I haven't gone to their Facebook page, but I might look about joining them. So what kind of products can we get? There's a lot of products that we have access to. Most photographers I know deal with a professional lab, and to deal with them, you've got to show that you're not a full-time photographer, but a professional photographer, and those labs typically aren't available to consumers. But it's surprising what the Costco's of the world had. So for traditional prints, the 4x6s, 5x7s, 8x10s, 1114s, you might ask where they're getting them made. If they're getting them made at a drugstore or even Costco, the archiveability, if I'm saying that right, or the longevity may be in question. If they're using a professional lab, it's their 100-year prints. They'll last 100 years in reasonable humidity and sunlight. Wallets, I know for sure that we get better wallets because we can get the corners cut, we can have foil stamps added, and they're nicer than the Costco prints, which you have to cut yourself. Most people are aware of canvases. There's different sizes of canvases available. They're gorgeous. Something relatively new is our metal prints. The labs are now able to print right on top of brushed and maybe polished aluminum, and they're pretty stunning looking. Their canvas is pretty pricey, and metal prints are fairly pricey, but they're stunning. Some photographers will order or offer albums, and that's I've done it a handful of times where it's a collection of prints, images in a coffee table style book or I guess a Shutterfly style book. Some photographers will give out proof books where you get all the images and they might have proof written across, but you can keep that. And then cards, cards, what are those? Those are like, I'm not exactly sure what that is. Baseball cards or other things. And then all sorts of other stuff. If you can print on it, we can offer senior pictures on it. So ask your photographer if you're looking for a blanket, a coffee cup, a sweatshirt. There's some senior banners, some collage kind of things that different photographers will do. They should all be available.
Mark.
Okay, so a big one. Editing, retouching.
Mark,
yep.
Before you go to that, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Because, of course, I think just what I see in my office is not as many, certainly in the last 5 years, there's been a very big reduction in the number of graduation announcements, the traditional announcements that we had when we were in high school for graduation. Very few, less and less people are ordering those anymore. And lots of families are ordering some kind of, for their open house, some kind of card kind of announcement, kind of a postcard kind of thing or something like that. Is that something most photographers offer, or is that something that you get access to the picture and then you go do it on your own?
That's a really great question, and that kind of goes back to what can you use the images for. The way I treat those is the Costco's, I guess, of the world offer such great design options, and so I choose not to offer those in my practice. I know other photographers do. So typically I would photograph in June, July, August, and come February, March, April, May, if a family requests a handful of images to use for the graduation announcement, I've always given them images that they can use. So I'm turning over an electronic version of the image and losing any print tracking, but that's fine. They've almost always ordered their prints. So that's a great question. And if you're, just about every family I can think of will do a printed announcement, and almost always they use some of the yearbooks or the senior shots. So ask if you can get images. How many can you get? Is there an additional cost?
And
So
I think that's a question a lot of people have, and they're not sure.
Yeah, they should ask, because boy, it would be sad to be priced out of being able to use those, or waiting to the last minute expecting you can get them and miss a date because you couldn't get the images.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, editing, retouching, and compositing. I'm not sure if I spelled that correctly, but these are the words that I use to describe a wide variety of stuff that photographers do to images. So editing to me is a general change to the image. Most photographers I know will shoot in RAW, which means it's an unprocessed image from the camera, goes right to the computer. We use software to, I'll say, optimize the images. So we optimize or edit them for color, contrast, and brightness, just to make nice color images out of all of them. We'll sometimes crop them also. So yeah, the other part of editing is, and I'll show you on the next slide, is kind of global adjustments. We make it a black and white, we add color, we take away color, we make it more contrasty, we make it less contrasty. Those are all global adjustments. Retouching is where you're fixing blemishes, removing stray hairs, bags under the eyes, scar removal, logo removal, and then compositing is putting images together to make a big image. So here on the left-hand side is an out-of-the-camera shot. That's how the shot came out of the camera. In the upper left-hand corner under editing is how I interpreted that shot. I said, well, it should be a little bit warmer. I added a little bit of contrast. I made it slightly brighter. And then the other versions there, I made a black and white next to it. And in the lower left-hand corner, I did some fun color stuff. And then another version, I cropped it and rotated it a little bit. So those are what I call edited shots. Retouching is the one on the right-hand side where I've gone in and removed his blemishes, and that was, in his example, a fair bit to do. But those are the words I use, and I think they're fairly common. And then compositing would be, I didn't have a great example, but this was an example I did of a volleyball team. Obviously, it's not one student, but a shot I'm doing of a basketball player I'll photograph her in the gym, take a picture of the gym, and put them together later. So that's compositing. And you're going to want to ask your photographer how much of that is included, what would extra be, and hopefully use those words and they make sense to all the photographers. So how are proofs previewed and presented? So I think I kind of went over this. Most people that I know use a website or a gallery. Almost always they're online. A lot of photographers will do print sales in person. They'll either project with a projector or show on a monitor. I've been asked to go to families' homes and help them choose, and I'm glad to do that. I will often, the family will look at the pictures online, and I'll look at them in my editing software and say, well, I can do this, that, and the other for them. And then ask how long the proofs, if they're online, how long they're available online. I know that some photographers limit how long you can use them. They want you to make a decision within a period of time. It's often a month or two. And if that time expires, you may not be able to see them again. I don't know what would happen if you made a request, but ask them. And again, the proof books, and I guess this is kind of a redundant slide. We've gone over individual prints and senior reps. So. And this is Lynette's daughter, Emily, up by the truck there. So for high school seniors, how do they get ready for the session? What do they have to do? And for the young ladies and the guys, obviously getting a good night's rest and looking their best. The girls, they want to wear as much makeup as they usually would, maybe a bit more. I had a session here last week where I brought in a makeup and hair stylist, and that was a lot of fun. And for that session, the girls got made up a little bit more than they typically would, but it was a glamour session. And if they're going to get their hairstyle, do it about an hour, pretty close to the session. Get a manicure and pedicure if needed, having their nails look great. And on wardrobe, I always say for the students to bring what they're comfortable in. If they're not comfortable in it, they're not gonna like it. It should fit well. I prefer simpler colors and patterns to more complex, and I try and do as few logos as possible.
Can I just stop because somebody asked a question about that?
Sure.
There was a question that says, what does logo removal mean? And that was back a few when you were in the editing. And what do you mean by that?
That would be maybe there's a Nike swoosh on the shirt or the shoe or something, and the family didn't want it there, so we would remove that. If it was a whole T-shirt, that would be fairly difficult to do. But if it was, no, I've removed logos before, like the young man last year, the 4-H county fair. I removed that logo from his sweater just because it didn't add to the picture at all. As Mom said, "Oh, I didn't know he wore that sweatshirt," kind of thing.
Okay. Somebody else asked another question, and that was, can you take photos while the subject is moving?
Oh yeah, like that. He was trying to run as fast as he could. It's a little more challenging to get focus, and I guess, well, I'll go back to the slides. So moving students are more of a challenge, mostly for focus and getting the lighting consistent. I've put them on motorcycles before. I've had them running. So yeah, certainly, and that adds to do it well, adds another layer of skill that the photographer would need to do that well.
Okay.
But it's fairly common.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. And then the last bullet here, most schools have requirements for the yearbook shots, and I think they're often identical to the dress code, so exposed shoulders, spaghetti straps, cleavage, and you want to check out the requirements before you do that yearbook shot and make sure you're covered there. And for the yearbook shot, most girls wear a simple sweater top that they look good in. The colors shouldn't really be that big issue. Almost always the backgrounds are gray, middle to light to dark gray, so any color they wear is often fine. So for the guys, they're a little simpler. If they're going to get a haircut, do it a week or so before the shoot. You don't want to get your haircut on Monday and shoot on Tuesday. It just doesn't look right often, not always. Yeah, if they've got product for their hair, bring it. Again, bring a few changes of clothes. This time of year, the kids are in shorts and long pants and jackets, so we do quite a few. For the yearbook shot, I kind of did an assessment last year because a student asked me. In Clarkston, it was my assessment that 60% of the young men had jackets and ties. Another 25% had shirts and ties, and if the math works out right, no, the last 5% were in no collar sweaters or t-shirts, and that there may not be a requirement for public school. For private school, there often is the uniform or jacket and tie, and again, you can almost always get the specs online for your school, and the photographer should have a copy of those and make sure that they do that correctly. And then bring props, and if you want, I'm not sure why that one's here, bring props, family and friends, if you agreed on it. I say that one thing I didn't cover is who can go to the shoot. I can't imagine a photographer would not allow a friend or a family member to come along, and I always encourage it. So ask who can come to the shoot. It does get to be troublesome if there's too many people at the shoot. I try and limit it to one person in the immediate area where we're shooting, because it can be a distraction sometimes. So that's really all I had for senior photography. Before we move to family, which is pretty much the same, were there any other questions? Something we didn't cover? Something I could say more about?
I don't see any other questions, and I don't see anybody
silence.
writing right now.
Okay. Good. They can always ask questions later. So Susan and Lynette thought it might be valuable for the families. Maybe they're not in the situation that they need a senior yet, but they still wanted to talk about other forms of photography. So this slide kind of addresses family photography.
I do want to just say one thing here, because this is something, if you're getting ready to send your first child to college in the next few years, If you thought you wanted to get a family photo, start thinking about it, because sometimes it takes a little bit of coordinating to get everybody in the right place at the right time, in the right clothes and that right everything. And once that child goes off to school, the number of days you have available to do something like that drops dramatically. So if you're thinking you would like to get a family photo, that's, really, while everybody's still living at home under the same roof, as hard as it is, it's easier.
Yes, that's because they're often home just for holidays, and they're busy, and everyone's busy. I'll do holiday shoots like that, and they're tough to coordinate to get all the family together. So if you're considering a family portrait shoot, the considerations are pretty much the same as seniors. It's a group of people instead of one person. So do you like the photographer style? Can you get along with them personality-wise? What product do they have to offer? What would you get? Again, you would want to think about what your final output would be. I tend to lean towards large canvas prints or large prints for the walls, and then families would typically order 5x7s and 8x10s. So I have a conversation with them early and give them a price for everything, so they're aware of what the whole price would be. And that's really all I had on family photography. It's about the same. The next group of slides are kind of the ABCs of choosing a new camera. So unless I hear differently from Lynette, we will move on. All right. So
I do have one question. I have a question.
Okay.
Do you keep all the photos you take in case someone comes in the future that would like those photos that you took like a year ago? How do you handle storage?
I'm a storage nut. I have a series of hard drives on my desktop, and those are backed up to another series of hard drives at the other end of the house. And most of those hard drives, I'm in the process of doing it now, are backed up to the cloud. So most photographers will say that a photo doesn't exist unless it's in at least 2 places, and I'm leaning towards 3. So my plan is to keep all the images I shoot forever. I would certainly hope that any professional photographer would, well, you might want to ask how they back up images. And accidents happen. It's not a perfect world. One of my biggest worries is I would leave a shoot and then plug the card into the computer, and for some reason before I could get the images downloaded, the card failed, or there was a write error, and I couldn't retrieve them. I've got 2 retrieval softwares that I use, had to use on occasions, and then there's even more elaborate ways to get data back. But I would expect that every photographer should keep them. I can't imagine why indefinitely. I was in a small town not too far away a while ago, and it was trash day, and my wife and I were in the street, and thousands of negatives were blowing down the street. A garbage can had ripped open, and the photographer had thrown away all the negatives, which was quite a bit, so you would want to ask. Sometimes they may charge to unarchive the images, but I don't know about that.
I can imagine that we had a situation in our family, and I can imagine for a photographer this situation has happened many times. My husband and I were married, and just 2 months after our wedding, my husband's father died, and they were the last professional pictures taken of the whole family. And of course, when we placed our wedding picture order, there were a lot of extra pictures because of all those family pictures, and it was really the last picture. So, and I imagine you've had those situations too, and sometimes it might not be 2 months, it might be a little longer than that.
Could be, yeah. So if you're, whenever I overhear that someone is thinking about a camera, I always offer to them to at least have a conversation with me, and what I can do is help explain some of the numbers and what some of the features are, and give them there's so many cameras to choose from. So I'll run through this pretty quickly, and hopefully it'll help someone, and please feel free to call me if I can help in any way. So the different camera types, and I've kind of shown some of them here, are the basic point and shoots, and they fit in the pocket and they work out pretty well. The in-betweeners is that upper right-hand Nikon. They look a little bit more like a DSLR, but the lenses don't come off and they have a few more features. Something that is relatively new are mirrorless cameras, and I think they will take over photography in the near future here. I think they're going to replace DSLRs. I'm on the fence about getting one shortly because they're so good and they make so much sense. And then the other camera there is a DSLR, which is styled like the 35mm cameras. And while I'll get to it in a second. And so the common features that just about every camera has is the SD card for storage. A lot of people are familiar with those. Mini SDs might be in their phones. They're very common. They're fairly inexpensive way of storage. And I've even washed my SD cards and dried them, and the images are fine. Every camera I know of has rechargeable batteries. A lot of them often come out, or they're AA cells or something like that. And then the last one here is not all megapixels are created equal. Say that camera in the upper left-hand corner, the red Nikon, actually my wife has that camera, might be a 20 megapixel camera, and the camera in the lower right-hand corner might be a 20 megapixel camera. You're going to get much more pleasing images with the more expensive camera. A pixel isn't a pixel isn't a pixel. So the point and shoots, they range from 100 to 600. Most of the brands are pretty okay. If you can recognize the name, Casio even makes some, and they're all right. The Nikons and Panasonics and Canons, they're all pretty good. I get mine from the big box stores. They're just fine. Almost all of them have zooms, and the lens goes in and out. I put a note here to ignore digital zoom. All that is really is cropping in on the image and throwing away information. And they have acceptable image quality. I would say the image quality is probably comparable to most smartphones. The smartphones don't have zoom lenses, so that's a benefit for them. And then you have little or no, other than turning the flash on or off, little or no control over different options or make it brighter or darker. Here are the in-betweeners. They're a little more expensive. I think Canon and Nikon are the primary manufacturers of those. They come with better, as you can see, the piece of glass there on the front is bigger than the point and shoots, and that's important to photographers, how big the glass is and the quality of the glass. They almost all have zoom lenses. The image quality is pretty good. And then you have fully automatic control to moderate manual control. So if I pick that up, I could probably make it do what I wanted to, or put it on fully automatic. The mirrorless cameras, boy, they're all over. They're 400 to 2,000. I think there's even some that are more expensive than that. And actually, the off brands are leading the charge, or the better cameras. The Fuji and the Panasonic, and maybe are exceptional cameras with often the same sensor of the better DSLRs. What they've done is removed the mirror that clunks up and down in the DSLR and made the camera simpler and lighter. And none of the lenses that are on a mirrorless will fit on a DSLR, so you're doing a new lens system. And they do have removable lenses and acceptable image quality. I would say acceptable to very good, and very limited control. That's not accurate. They go from fully automatic to fully manual. And then your DSLR. So that's my workhorse. That's what I use mostly, and I think most photographers do. They're $500 for inexpensive Nikon D5300 with a kit lens, up to, I put $3,000, but the flagship Nikons and Canons are $6,000, $7,000, and $8,000. You know, the Olympic photographers would use those. When people ask me if they're in the DSLR market, what brand camera they should get, I tell them what does more of your friends and family have. If you're shopping for a camera and you're a friend of mine and you buy Canon, I can't help you. I can't loan you anything, or let's use any of my lenses or flash or anything. If you're Nikon, you can borrow a lens or a flash, or we can talk about what works and what didn't work. So a little bit of familiarity. The other thing I say is, did I put it down here farther? Yeah, Sony. The off-brand cameras, Sony is one example of those. It's a very good camera, and apples for apples, a Sony compared to a Canon and a Nikon. You'll get more bang for the buck with a Sony. But the problem with that is they're not as compatible. I don't understand how to make them work as well as my Nikon or Canons that I understand. So they're a little less familiar for most photographers. Separate lenses, as in the 35mm days, pull the lens off, put a different lens on, change them. And I spend most of my money on lenses. I've got my two main workhorse lenses I've had for 6 or 8 or 10 years. They're $1,000 and $2,000 lenses, and I burn through a $2,000 camera in a year or two. So I replace my camera bodies and regularly replace my lenses. One nice thing about Nikon is they did not change their mount, and you can put, I think this is accurate, any Nikon lens on any Nikon camera and it'll work. So I've got some old lenses from the film days that still work very well. Canon changed their mount a few years ago and actually made it better than Nikon. They made it bigger. So there's a benefit and a drawback for that. If you get a 35mm camera, the note here is nifty 50. A 50mm 1.8 lens will be your fastest lens, and you can shoot best in lowest light situations. And the example I use is if you get a kit lens, which is the inexpensive lens that comes with the inexpensive cameras, and you want to shoot Christmas photos, you're going to have to use flash. If you get a nifty 50, it's a 50mm 1.8. You are more likely to be able to shoot the kids unwrapping Christmas presents under the Christmas tree and not to have a flash. So if you care about the quality of the light, a 50mm lens will help you with that. And the images are outstanding. They've come so far with the cameras these days. And you can go fully automatic to fully manual, and there's all sorts of toys to play with, flashes and extender tubes and all sorts of stuff like that. So certainly that. And then there's a whole series of cameras above that made for commercial or more professional cameras, but they're in the tens of thousands of dollars. And then I made this slide for used equipment. I have purchased some cameras on eBay. I've purchased just recently a lens on Craigslist. The more electronic an item is, the less likely I am to buy it used. But I've had fairly good success. I've purchased some old equipment even from pawn shops. I got some old flashes that work great for me. I use them every week for very little money. So if you know what you're doing, you can get some used stuff. And that's pretty gosh darn close to the end.
I have another question.
Questions or comments?
I do have another question. It says, the question is, do you recommend any cameras, lenses for example, taking pictures of the moon?
And did you say, do I recommend getting Canon lenses or camera lenses?
No, cameras. Any particular camera or lenses?
Well, I was just talking, my wife showed me the moon's going to be 30% bigger. We should go out and take pictures. It's fairly difficult to take a picture of the moon because of the amount of zoom that you need. Probably a 400 to 600mm lens. I don't have one that long. They're big and pricey. So with a 200mm lens, the moon would probably take up 1/5, 1/8 the width of a frame, and that's not big enough to be impressive in my book. So I don't do moon shots. With an 800mm lens, the moon might fill the frame, and that would be more stunning. So shooting the moon is not difficult. To get it large in the frame is expensive.
Okay. I get another question.
All right.
Did you go to college to become a photographer? Tell us a little bit about your schooling and education and training.
Yeah, I went to high school and got A's and B's, and went to college, and I flunked out of college. I have a .3 average at Schoolcraft. But I started at a commercial studio in '83, and I worked for the worst automotive photographer in the city. Worked with her for about 1.5 years, and as an assistant you set up the lights, you set up the camera, you load the film, you actually take the photo. And then I started working with one of the best photographers in the world at automotive photography. And we traveled the country and got to a few countries, worked in Paris in the studio for 2 weeks at a time a couple of times, traveled Italy, saw all sorts of great stuff. And then 4 of us left that studio and started our own commercial studio. We had a big building in Highland Park that you could park semis in, and that's about when the industry changed. We survived the digital transition, but we didn't survive the CGI transition. And all that time, I had been taking my own photos for friends and families, and shooting weddings and shooting portraits. I most enjoy shooting portraits. I'm intrigued by capturing the essence of a person, so I had always shot them. And the commercial business went away for me, and so I started concentrating on portraits.
Great. Okay.
So I get to get up in the morning and work in my jammies for a few hours.
I'm putting your website and your.
Well, I've got this up.
Oh, good. Okay. So
Yeah.
great.
So I wanted to mention one thing. I'm really one business, but I split my websites into 3 offers. MPK Seniors is a website that is only high school seniors, so a bride wouldn't go there, or a guy looking for a commercial shoot. You Bet I Do Photography is my wedding site, and it's all weddings all the time on there. And then MPK Photo is my more general site where I do commercial, I guess, executive portraits and families.
Great. Thank you. We're going to stay on the line, Mark. You and I are going to stay on the line. Anybody who has questions, who didn't want to ask the question to the whole group but would like to ask Mark a question, just unmute yourself or write in the chat box. Everybody else, unless you have something else you'd like to add, thank you very much for coming tonight. Remember to spread the news about our Thursday/Tuesday series. We'd like to have lots of people. We just are trying to share information and good resources. Thanks a lot, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Oh, I should mention this since before everybody leaves. Next Sunday, if you're a client of mine, next Sunday the 10th from 4 to 5:30, we would love for you to come to the office. We're having client appreciation, lots of really fun things. We are having students who are off to college or have graduated from college already to come and talk about their experience and give their tips of wisdom, the things that have helped them be successful. So hopefully you can make it, and we need you to RSVP because we're going to have a really nice gift for you. Thanks.
I'll RSVP to that.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Oh, I have another question. What is the most creative shot that you have ever taken for seniors, pictures?
I can show them. Oops.
Great. We'd love to see them.
I think I included it in here. Let's see. Am I
You're
on?
still live.
Okay, so, well, I got to a place that I'm going to back up here so you can see. Let's see, I'm going to back up. Where was it? This shot. This was Oxford Lake Orion senior, and we went out one foggy morning, and the sun was coming through the fog, and I thought that was pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say the composite shots of like the track runner. Let's see if we can find those. That was something like the baseball player. I really like those shots. I'm working on a series of sports athletes. And I don't know if let's see if I included the musician series. Maybe I didn't. There's a series I'm doing. Well, this is representative of it. There's better versions, kind of side-lit musicians.
Do you have, I would expect most students bring props.
No, about half maybe.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm surprised.
Yeah, not that many.
I'm surprised by that. Kind of based on, I guess, based on the pictures I see, I guess that's maybe true, about half. I saw an interesting thing today, and I didn't look at it closely. I was in a school, and I saw a senior picture, and I don't know, I wasn't close enough to see exactly what it was, but it was vertical. It was half the size, cut vertically of, so just take that picture you have on the screen right now. It was half the size of that vertically.
Right.
And it was their senior picture. It was in a classroom. A teacher had put the senior pictures up on a file cabinet, and there were, now that I think about it, I wonder if it was the same girl in two different pictures cropped together, or if it was actually a picture cut like that. I don't remember. I mean, I couldn't tell, and it wasn't, it would have been rude of me to go over and look real closely.
Oh.
But it was, I'd never seen anything like it before. It was like half the size. So.
Interesting. A very extreme vertical crop.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
So. All right. Thank you everyone for coming tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. It was fun to do.
Yep. Have a nice night, Mark. I'll see you next Sunday for sure.
Yep. Great.
Okay. We have just a couple people left on. So
Okay.
good night, everyone.
Good night.